I'm building an HO scale craftsman kit from Mind Mount Models on Ron's Trains and Things right now. Hi, I'm Ron of Ron's Trains and Things, and if you'd like to see more model railroad tips, tools, and techniques, then be sure to subscribe down below and click that little bell icon so you can catch future videos. I've been thinking for some time about building an HO scale module to be able to display and photograph some HO scale locomotives and rolling stock, as well as just to try my hand at both kit building and scratch building some structures in HO scale. Thought it would be fun to have those videos for the channel. I also thought it would be fun to just branch out a little bit in my own model railroading expertise. So recently, Ron Kleiss at Mind Mount Models provided me with one of their fine craftsman kits. It is Randy's Auto Repair. And today we're going to be building that structure, and I'm going to show you exactly how it comes together and exactly what the kit entails and how it works. I'm very excited about working on this kit and look forward to sharing it with you. Now, before I head over to the workbench, I have just a quick word for my channel members. First of all, I want to say thank you for your support of this channel through membership. I also want to remind you that I have some bonus content for you, and you can find that by going to the Community tab on my YouTube homepage. There, under the Community tab, you'll find links to all of the bonus material for channel members at every level. And if you're not a member, but you'd like to get a little more out of Ron's Trains and Things, then you can learn more about channel membership by clicking that little blue join button right below this video. You'll learn everything that you need to know. Well, now let's head on over to the workbench, get this kit opened up, and get started building. Check out our sponsor, Midwest Model Railroad. With some of the best prices and customer service in the business, they're your one-stop model railroad shop. MidwestModelRR.com. Link in the description. This is the kit that Ron Kleiss at Mind Mount Models shared with me. It is Randy's Auto Repair Shop, and I really like this kit for what I'm wanting to do on this HO scale module, because what I remember from my childhood in the 70s, which is what I want to model time-wise on this module. This reminds me a lot of the places where I grew up. This would have been an old structure at that time, and I'm going to model it that way, and I think it'll come out really, really cool. Now, for most of this, I'm going to show you how I do this in stages, and we'll voice over it, but I do want to open the kit here in front of you just so you can get a sense of what it looks like. I've opened this, and so I kind of know what I'm expecting here, I want to share with you here, one of the things I think is absolutely fantastic about Mind Mount Models is that they provide these beautifully detailed instructions. I know Ron, of course, designs these kits, but he also builds them and gets a sense for what you need to do in order to be successful in the build. And then he takes photographs and gives you some very detailed instructions here that still allow you the flexibility of doing what you want and making it your own, but also gives you really some great both written instructions and visual instructions through the photographs of exactly how it is all going to go together. And here's some photographs of his finished version of the model. So that is a great help that I really appreciate. This shows you how the cardboard siding goes into place. And it also has some specific instructions here that go along with the stockade fence, which is part of the kit. And then, of course, you have the kit parts itself. We have some plastic and some cast metal detail parts, including windows, doors, vents, and like a smokestack, chimney, such thing. We've got the piece of clear acetate for the windows. We've got all the laser cut wood parts. I want to be careful with those because I don't want to do anything to cause any warpage of them. Just pulling them out to show you here. This is the roofing material, which is actually a peel and stick because it has been printed on a label type of paper. You literally just peel it off and stick it on. We've got some scale lumber of various sizes. that we'll be using in the kit. And then of course this in here, take it out very carefully, is the cardboard siding, which is also laser cut. And there's the stockade fence, and lots of laser cut shingles. And I'm not going to take all these out, but just going to take out one bit so you can kind of see them there. And those are going to look fantastic, I can tell. The first step in building this structure is to cut all of the laser cut wood parts from their carrier sheet. I cut very carefully using a sharp number 11 blade. I always keep the carrier sheet parts. They are great for testing paint and various techniques before trying them on the actual structure parts. I used a fine sanding stick to sand smooth the tabs that I had cut from each section. I cut the supplied 1/8 inch square stock to brace the back of the wall sections. I glued each brace in place with wood glue, leaving adequate space for the sections to join at the corners and the roof line. I planned to model an older structure with some peeling paint and weathered wood beneath it. To create the weathered wood look, I stained the walls with a solution of 1 teaspoon India ink in 1 pint of 70% isopropyl alcohol. This stain looks quite dark when first applied, but it dries much lighter. Subsequent coats of the wash can be applied to create a darker, more weathered wood look. I watched carefully for any warping of the wood. One wall did start to warp a bit, so I weighed it down with some machinist blocks to keep it flat until it dried. I wanted to paint the main structure with a two-tone style similar to the structure on the box, so I measured and masked off the lower 4 scale feet of the structure. The rear walls are all white with no accent color at the bottom. The upper portion of the walls are white. To create a peeling paint effect, I applied mineral spirits to the walls first. While they were still wet, I painted them with a white paint. For this effect, a thicker paint is preferred, so I used an inexpensive white craft paint which you can find at most hobby stores and Walmart. I applied a generous coat of the paint and waited for it to dry just to the touch. I only worked on 2 wall sections at a time so as not to allow the paint to dry too much before applying the peeling effect. When the paint was just dry to the touch, I used painter's tape to stick to the surface and then peel it away, peeling some of the paint from the surface with it. This reveals the weathered wood beneath the paint and leaves a very nice effect. You can peel as little or as much of the paint as you wish by varying the number of times you apply and peel the tape. After the white paint had dried, I removed the masking tape from the bottom section of the walls. I removed any unwanted extra paint that bled under the masking tape with the point of my hobby knife. I decided to use some old Polyscale Depot Olive for the accent color. This color combination reminds me of an old automotive and metal shop that my dad used to frequent when I was a kid. I used the same techniques as I did with the white paint, but the finer, thinner hobby paint doesn't peel away as well. The final result was pleasing to me nonetheless. I pre-cut the corner trim, leaving each piece about 1/8 inch longer than needed, and I painted them the same accent green. When the paint had dried, I glued the corner trim to the correct wall sections with wood glue. With most wood kits that I have built, the trim lumber does not perfectly match the thickness of the walls. Because of this, care needs to be taken to glue the trim on in such a way as to create the best possible corner joints. Some test fitting before and during the gluing process of the trim is a really good idea. I then touched up the paint on the corner trim and any places that didn't look quite right. When the glue had dried on the trim, I used a sharp number 11 blade to trim them to length, using the wall as a guide to get the correct angle for the cuts. I sanded the ends so as to be sure they were flush with the corresponding portions of the walls. Next, it was time to begin gluing the wall sections together. For all of these glue joints, only a thin application of glue is needed. When I was satisfied with the alignment and fit of the corner joints, I used machinist blocks and magnets to hold them square and to clamp them together tightly until the glue dried. Only the larger main section of the structure has 4 full walls. I glued the front wall into this section while still held in place by the machinist blocks. Perhaps this is a good time to emphasize that taking one's time and paying great attention to detail in both painting and gluing yields the best results. Do not get in a hurry and double check everything as you go. While the wood glue was drying, I turned to the plastic door and window details from Tichy Train Group. I washed these parts to remove any residue and fingerprints, rinsed them, blotted them with a paper towel, and left them to dry. From this point, I handled the plastic parts with gloves so as not to leave fingerprints behind. I cut them from the sprues with flush-cutting tweezers, sanded the edges where the injection gates were, and placed them on some painter's tape for painting. Using the same accent green as before, I brush painted the trim with a fine artist's brush. Since I didn't prime these pieces, it took a few coats of paint to cover the plastic fully. The doors and windows in the rear of the building are all white. I painted the mullions in all of the windows white. This detail painting takes a steady hand and will require a few touch-ups along the way. Be careful not to leave any globs of paint in the corners of the mullions as the paint dries. When the paint is dry, the smaller sets of mullions can be cemented into the back of their window frames. I used a solvent cement for this. For the lean-to shed, I assumed that this portion of the building would have been added at a later time and thus might look different from the rest of the structure, so I painted it white straight onto the wood. When the paint had dried, I applied an India ink wash to the paint to gray it up and to bring out some of the wood detail. I intend to add some more weathered and rotten wood effects to the bottom of these boards later. The garage door is laser cut with the roof sections. I cut it from the carrier sheet with a hobby knife and sanded the edges smooth, and then painted it white. When that paint had dried, I used some panel liner from AK Interactive to try to bring out the lines between the door sections, but it didn't wick into the joints as well as I would have hoped, so I had to paint it in and ended up weathering the entire door with this product, thinning it on the surface with Turpenoid until I achieved a look that I was satisfied with. Next, I joined the wall assemblies together. The tabs on the walls fit very snugly into the laser cut slots. I had to sand some of the tabs a bit to get them to fit. These small clamps are fantastic for holding glue joints together while they dry. I've linked them in the description down below this video as my Amazon pick of the week if you'd like to check them out. I measured and cut pieces of 1/8 inch square stock to glue between the gable peaks to serve as roof ridges. The peaks of the garage portion cannot be braced initially as the rest of the walls are because of the windows that are in the gables, so they had warped just a little bit through the painting process. Installing this ridge and clamping them together while the glue dried solved this warping issue. The kit did not come with trim for the garage door. It's assumed that you will simply paint the edges of the opening to simulate trim. Instead, I used a piece of N-scale 2x6 to trim the door. I painted it green, and when it had dried, I cut a piece to fit the top of the door opening, then one for each side, and glued them in place. I trimmed the length to flush with the bottoms of the walls. I then glued the garage door in place. One of my least favorite parts of structure building is adding glazing to windows, but it must be done. I cut pieces of acetate to fit each sash for each window and glued them in place with canopy glue. Canopy glue dries clear and will not cloud or mar the glazing as solvents or CA will do. Care must be taken to cut the acetate to fit the windows, but not to be so large as to interfere with their installation in the wall openings. I installed the door and window castings using wood glue. I prepared and installed the roof of the lean-to section. This roof is simulated roll roofing using peel and stick roofing that is laser cut from label stock. I decided that the roof of this structure would be brown, so I painted this roll roofing with burnt umber craft paint. The roof stock has laser cut detail to simulate roofing nails. I was careful not to apply too much paint and obliterate this detail. I brushed long ways on the roofing to use the brush strokes to simulate the correct texture of the roll roofing. To vary the color and add more texture, I added some grimy black paint using almost a dry brushing technique. I cut the roof section from the laser cut carrier sheet and sanded the edges smooth, and then applied the peel and stick roofing, being very careful to get each course on straight and overlapping each one over the previous one. I then glued this roof section onto the structure with wood glue. I cut the rest of the roof sections out of the carrier sheet and sanded the edges smooth. I glued each section onto the structure, being sure to install them in the right order. The roof of the main structure overlaps that of the garage section. Thus, the garage section roof must be installed first. Take care to install each section in the correct place. One side of the garage roof is wider than the other. I applied a bit of extra glue in the valleys where the two roofs join to provide a bit of extra strength. And thus we have our basic structure complete. Adding tab shingles, the roof sign, and other details and weathering will really bring this structure to life. Those will be the topic of my next video. Well, I have to tell you that this kit has been a lot of fun to build so far. I love Craftsman kits like this, and this HO scale kit from Mind Mount Models has been a fantastic one. Really appreciate Ron Kleiss and Mind Mount Models, the way you put your kits together. I love the way you do your instructions. They make these a breeze and a real joy to do. I'm looking forward to the next video where we're going to be putting the shingles on the roof and adding a lot of other detail parts to this particular kit, and I know that you will enjoy that, and so be sure and watch for that coming up in the next episode here at Ron's Trains and Things. Also, be aware that this is not the first Craftsman kit that I've built. I've also built some in scale, and there's a link in the corner of your screen right now to a video where I show you how I did that in scale. You'll want to check that video out as well. Hey, be sure and check the description down below where you're going to find a link to my Amazon page and my Amazon pick of the week, as well as my MicroMark promo code that will save you 10% on regularly priced items at micromark.com, and tons of other great links that you will enjoy and benefit from. Be sure and check that out. Well, if you'd like some more Model Railroad content right now, check out the links on your screen. And be sure and join me each Tuesday as I bring you even more great Model Railroad videos. And I look forward to seeing you then.
10, Lizzie?